Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Sharpenel. I'm the Executive Director of el Museo del Barrio. I would like to announce, thank you. I would like to announce our last activity of the exhibition, which is a really interesting conversation, really interesting panel between Yasmin Ramirez, Rodrigo Moura, moderated by Rocio Aranda. Muchas gracias, Rocio, Rodrigo, and Yasmin. I would like to thank John Noriega for the deep thinking, for years and years of friendship and support to careers, Raphael Montañez Ortiz careers. I would like to thank Raphael Montañez Ortiz for the great performance that we all experienced this afternoon. Amazing, that deeply touched me. Thank you, Raphael Montañez Ortiz, for founding el Museo del Barrio in 1969, for 70 years of career as an artist, as an educator, and also for being this great activist that has shaped the scene for Latinos in New York. As John Noriega said, Raphael Montañez Ortiz has been a deep thinker, not only about the art community, but about museums. So El Museo del Barrio is a community museum that has to become a platform for conversations and discussions about inclusion, about equity, and obviously about a community that has been historically excluded from major institutions in the US. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the sponsors of the exhibition, Bank of America. Muchísimas gracias, Bank of America, for supporting this exhibition. Tony Bechara, Terra Foundation, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and the Department of Cultural Affairs of New York. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Bienvenidos al Museo del Barrio y empezamos con el panel. Gracias.
That was amazing. Does everyone feel like you had a fantastic catharsis just now?
Yes.
Yasmin said she's going to buy a shredder and do it every day.
Yes.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Rocio. I'm a former curator of el Museo del Barrio, where I organized a show for the museum's 45th anniversary that included a section on Raphael's work and its founding of the museum. Prior to that, I organized a retrospective of his work at Jersey City Museum, and El Museo purchased a work from that exhibition that now hangs in the galleries. I hope you got a chance to see it. It's the giant sofa destruction. I'm joined here by Rodrigo Moura, Chief Curator of el Museo del Barrio. Together with Julieta Gonzalez, Rodrigo organized the exhibition Raphael Montañez Ortiz, a contextual retrospective, a really excellent overview of Raphael's work featuring works by other artists of the avant-garde. I'm here also with Yasmin Ramirez, independent curator and scholar, part of the adjunct faculty at the City University of New York. And of course, by the man of the hour who needs no introduction, Raphael Montañez Ortiz, who just recently retired from his many years of teaching at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, and who is the founding director of El Museo del Barrio. Oh, you know what? I did mean to set my thing so that we don't go over, because I know everybody wants to ask questions, so I'm going to set it. Okay. So I'm going to ask everyone's question, but if it's okay with you, I'm going to start with Rodrigo and Yasmin really quick. For Rodrigo, I would love if you would tell a little bit about why this exhibition is important specifically for El Museo and its audiences.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. I thank you so much for the introduction, and Rocio. First of all, I want to say, how honored I am to be here with you all today, especially with Raphael, but also with you, Yasmin, and you, Rocio, and also in spirits with John Noriega, because you are really, people who inspired this exhibition. You and John with your scholarship, you with your long-term curatorial commitment with Raphael's work. So it's truly an honor to be part of this lineage of curators and scholars and researchers who worked with Raphael. And also I'd like to acknowledge it's really beautiful here with the shredded paper. You can't see it from there, but it's really beautiful. And such a wonderful performance, Ralph. Kudos, and you really use the scale of the theater and the stage audience dichotomy, dialectics in such a beautiful way. Really, really wonderful performance. I think everybody is of the same opinion. But to your question, Rocio, thank you. I think this show is very important for several reasons for the exhibition program of El Museo. I think it can be, a scene, as, of course, because of most importantly, because of the work of Raphael itself, for what the work does to our understanding of art of the moment, art of the 20th century. I'd like to just quote you for a second on that point briefly. The intellectual leap that Ortiz took in the late 50s was to make a connection between his sense of social confinement as a minority artist and the formal structures that the early modernists faced. I think this is bridging these two worlds together is really a major contribution to the field, and I think this exhibition wanted to reframe that, to go back to this and reinterpret that legacy. So that's, I think, the number one reason. The second reason, I think also, and here I want to shout out to Julieta Gonzalez, who's the co-curator of the show with me, was to really attest to the huge importance of Raphael as a thinker. I think this is something we wanted to, come across with the show as well, and an activist, and how he would, really in an interesting way, disregard the separation between spirit and matter, if you want, or theory and praxis, if you want, and as an activist, as a thinker, as an artist. So this is also why we wanted to, make it a contextual retrospective, as you say, and have his work as like a thread telling the history of art and the history of the field for the last 8 decades, right? Since the 50s into the present. In that regard, I think it was, I also would like to mention how much this is a show that really brings together a lot of, his most important and relevant works of that time, bringing them to the same place for the first time, especially like loans like, the 2 sculptures from the Tate, having the 6 archaeological finds together on the same space. So we really wanted to, have this combination of different lines of force coming from Raphael's work. And yeah, so I hope this helps answering your question.
It's a unique opportunity to see the early destroyed pieces of furniture all in the same place all at once, including the pieces from the Tate,
yes,
which had almost been forgotten, right?
True, yeah, I think this is a piece that entered that collection relatively recently. It's the 2 original furniture. One is a furniture, the other is a piano. You can see a piano as a furniture piece too if you want, if you don't play it especially. But both coming from his participation at the Dia Symposium in 1966 in London, yeah.
Yasmin, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you see Raphael in relation to the activism among artists in New York City in the late 60s and in relation to Nuyorican movements as they developed here.
Raphael's been a leader, absolute leader, since the 1960s. even from before. I do want to say just one thing about this exhibition and what makes it so exciting is the sightlines, the way that you've created an exhibition that captures the multifaceted nature of Ralph's work. Just walking through it, I think one of my favorite parts, besides of course seeing this is the first time I've ever seen all of these pieces together. This is really historic. I don't think they've ever been shown together, all the destruction pieces, but also the Maya semi pieces, and being able to see them in the same room, in the sightline, with the indigenous pieces. Each one is separate, but we can see the relationship. It's stunning.
Thank you so much.
You know, so I was really, really happy to witness this, to feel it as an aesthetic experience, which, you know, Raphael does visually, but also takes into consideration the body, right? And the beauty of feeling art, verbalizing art, dealing with your issues. You know, art is a release in some ways, right? A cathartic spirit that art can bring about. In terms of activism, I mean, the Puerto Rican art movement in New York, for me, begins in 1969 with Ralph Ortiz joining the Art Workers Coalition on the one hand, conceiving, because he's not the founding director, he's the conceiver of El Museo del Barrio. That's very deep. I mean, he was not in fact, one of, I think, an issue that happens with Ralph's work is that he thinks so far ahead. He's not interested necessarily in having created a formal institution without a component that would be mobile. Because he was extremely critical, as he could tell you himself, of the institutions of museums and who gets to run them. So he was anti-museum in some ways, even as he proposed the museum. He's thinking of a different structure. And in that respect, what also makes him so exemplary and begins this movement is that he meets a bunch of art students at the time, the future founders of Taller Boricua, and he immediately brings them into the fold and says, you know what? Why don't you form the first artist advisory committee? Museums, you know, they were fighting for museum reforms like the artist advisory, community input, all of these things that we basically have today is something that Ralph pioneered and that this institution pioneered. And so it was that collaboration as well as work with the Young Lords. I mean, these three movements coming together, the Young Lords, the founders of Taller Boricua, and Ralph conceiving and working to change this institution as a conception, but also going out and institutional critique, doing the protests with the workers, taking over the office of the director of the Metropolitan Museum and saying, you've got to share your resources with this community. It's astounding. He truly is someone that I have very deep respect for and brings together the vanguardist artistic practice with the vanguard political practice. Okay, yeah.
That's exactly right. Do you want some lemonade or water?
I'm doing fine.
Lemonade?
Yes.
And do you want to say anything, respond to?
I'm just thankful for all of you who, with all my stubbornness, pushed me out of the shadows.
Excellent. There you go. Here's a fresh one. Do you want to say anything about because Yasmin brought it up?
I'll take that over there.
Maya Semi.
Yes, I'll take this one.
Take this one. Okay. I'll keep this one.
Okay, let me have that. Okay.
I was just saying because Yasmin brought up the Maya Semis, which have been cleaned. For anyone who saw them before, they've been cleaned and they just look superb. The colors are so rich. And to see them in conjunction with the actual historic Taino objects in conversation with one another. I'd love to hear your thoughts about either whatever Rodrigo and Yasmin said, or a little bit about the Maya semis.
Well, the thing that I found kind of interesting is that the works won't be allowed into Mexico because they might have all sorts of funny little bugs in them. What's interesting about it is, though, it's footage I shot at a chicken slaughterhouse in Brooklyn. It was the last kosher chicken slaughterhouse in Brooklyn. And I saw what they did. I mean, they laundered the feathers. They sort of like dry cleaned them. And I found out that they deliver them to the sort of 42nd Street, these stores where a lot of people that make clothing and so on, the garment district, I think it's called. And that's where I went to find out where they sold them, and I bought them for that piece. But there's still this real distrust for the idea of any vermin, moving from one country to another and destroying crops and things like that. So it was kind of interesting to understand those aspects of the work which were not predictable, and I had no thought of the idea that these feathers from these chickens, which I saw slaughtered, and then the feathers sort of all peeled off, creating a danger for the agriculture of the country. It sort of turned this whole thing on its head, and I then washed the feathers very carefully when I used them. Yeah, and it's kind of, sometimes I'd have people used to visit, and I'd have these, the clothesline. My parents used to hang clothes on these little clips, kind of thing. And my apartment would have all these feathers on these little clips.
Each feather was clipped.
Yeah.
Being washed to dry.
Right, to make sure that they didn't harm the agriculture of the country, or the artworks that they would become a part of, and where the works might result. Right.
I think that kind of care that you're talking about, the washing of the feathers, is part of a line that you can see throughout your body of work. We talked a little bit about this, about the work as a kind of healing as a line that goes through, and how sometimes we see even photographs, you're dressed as a shaman. And so I wonder if we could talk a little bit about this through line of healing in the work that you see, and the care that he's talking about taking with.
Do you want to take it over? No, I think that this idea of the shamanic framework, the shamanic framework is something that I think it's really, crosses the work, because it's in the very beginning with the film work. And I'm very impressed by the film work, the early film work, and how strongly disorienting it is, right? And I think this is something that I really have to thank Julieta Gonzalez for having opened my eyes to, because she was very interested in working with Raphael's PhD dissertation as a conceptual basis for this exhibition, and the physio-psychoalchemy concept, right? So there were like two concepts that we pulled, we got from there, which is this idea of healing. I think it's everywhere, and I would really like to hear Ralph talking about it too. But also the idea of the ethnoaesthetics that we addressed a little bit in terms of the Maya zemis and the connections, the several connections that they allow us to do in the show, but also this idea of like an ethnographic critique, So it's not, I think that's extremely important, that it's there's a turn there. No, it's not about describing the other, and I think we wanted to put Lotte Baumgarten's work in like as a not as a, you can call it like a comparative, but also as a comment. No, it's a comment to Ralph's work. And so these two notions, you know, the physio-psychoalchemy and the ethnostaticus, we brought from his writings, and we use them in the show, also almost like to test them, you know, test the theories in exhibition form. And I would like just very briefly also to mention like the most recent works that I'm very fond of. And I was extremely also impressed seeing them when I first visited Raphael in his home studio in New Brunswick, because they have something that it's very domestic. No, it's that idea of the house that appears as the material, as iconography, but also the making of them. You know, working on a flat surface and using, you know, a material that's found online. So I found that work very fascinating too. Yeah. So it brings full loop, like a full circle, because it also, you know, refers back to the, you know, archaeological finds as, you know, the furniture works that he was destroying. But it's just a few thoughts around, you know, how this idea of healing appeared throughout the show. Yeah.
In thinking about actually healing, but also shamanism and the concept of the ceremonial being an important part, we were talking earlier about some of the performances. We were thinking specifically of the one in northern Italy that you did at sort of the base of the Alps, one of the early piano sacrifices, where the piano is carried by folks up the side of the mountain and sacrificed there. You know, this is something that recurs over. How many piano sacrifices have you done now?
Many.
Over 100.
Over 100? Wow, the last count I had was like 80 something.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You know, maybe we could talk a little bit about this idea of ceremony and how significant it is in the work. There's like a process that you think very carefully about and you record, and we've seen in the notes the order of things in which things are supposed to happen in a performance and this ritualistic kind of pace that you have in the performances.
Was that a question?
Just your thoughts on, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about your reflections on the piano sacrifice in the mountains.
Well, I had a very eccentric grandmother who, with things, with nature, I remember I used to play a lot of sports, handball, basketball, baseball, so on, and I would always be spraining a finger, and she would always go into her garden and get a twig, and then she would find I don't know, a couple of certain kind of ants, and then she would wrap them around the little twig and around my finger and a Band-Aid, and like 3 days later everything was fine. So I right away was really impressed, and I tried having a little ant farm for a while, but that didn't work. But whenever I would hurt myself, I would go to her. I hurt my knee at one point, and she did the same thing. She dug and dug and dug for this root, and then crushed it all and used when you want a liquid to get thick. Well, I forgot what that is. Used
Cornstarch?
Cornstarch, yes. And she mixed it all together and put it with a sort of like some kind of grassy result from bashing the root and thing. Put it on my knee, and like about 2 weeks later, everything was fine. And yet, at the beginning, it was, you know, really swollen. So and she also talked to spirits. So, and I found that especially fascinating. Of course, a lot of my friends that have always stayed distant from me, it saved me from, you know, some difficult situations, because I would promise them that my grandmother's ghosts would visit them. And so they would quickly turn around and walk away and, you know, say, you know, like, I have a family, you know, I mean, my sister's an astrologer, and I have an uncle who's always doing the tarot cards for people. So that was part of it. I remember I was heading home. The family had gone out for a dinner, and we're going up the stairs, and my mother says, "Stop!" You know, her hands up, and we're all like standing there. Okay, well, something's happening here. And there was a very thin string across the step, and some white powder. And she opens up a pocketbook, and she pulls out this little brush, and she brushes all the powder into a little pile. And then she puts it into, you know, like a little bag kind of thing. And she cut the string and wrapped it up and put it into this thing. She went around downstairs, went around to the back garden of the house, and we didn't see her for about 10, 15 minutes. And then she came back smiling. She said, "Okay, we can all go up the steps." You know, that kind of sort of consciousness of the sense of identity and meaning within identity. I always thought of us as kind of like the ghost people or something.
So it was in a sense that those family actions that involved maybe using nature in healing and the rituals of wrapping things up is deeply influential in your work. I think we can see that in terms of, for example, even the candy destructions that Chon mentioned at the beginning, right? Seeing something that is, you know, a sustenance as a material for creating something that is, in a way, candy can be healing also, but creating sculpture too. I was thinking about, you know, we talked a little bit about his work as an activist, and I was thinking about the newer work, since you brought them up, Rodrigo. What's interesting about the newer works to me is that they also are reminiscent of a little bit of a television screen, you know, with your history of film and video, which is so important. But also their activist work, when you think about the imagery of the early priest who did all the images, Fray Bernardo de las Casas, and the imagery that you see there, and you think about, you know, from the 60s to the current time that we're living in, the kind of racial strife that we're talking about, those images become so important in that work. Also the book cover about the Holocaust. It seems to me there's this line also of activism that's going, even in these sculptural and the works that are about accumulation, where you see these layers on top. It'd be nice to say a little bit more about the box.
Well, I did a piece at the Los Angeles Art Festival that I had wanted to do for a long time, and it grew out of a relationship. I lived in a Jewish Orthodox community, which was really kind of interesting because I was like the Shabbat Goy, and so I got to know a number of rabbis, and I got a lot of in sort of sense of, because like if I heard the word Kabbalah, I would right away be really curious about what it was. And there's one particular story that one of the rabbis used to tell. He was like a social worker in the family and helped families get along, kind of thing. And this elderly couple were always sitting together on you know, like with these two chairs when they face each other. What are they, love seats or something like that? Kind of thing. And they would always read poetry to each other and tell stories to each other and stuff like that. And they were very happy and very loving, and they had a loving daughter amongst a number of children. And this particular daughter was especially loving. And people used to say when the three of them were together on that couch, like it would glow, like, you know, there'd be And that it was explained to me as some sort of bioplasmic glow, you know, kind of thing. And so I was thinking, gee, I'd like to do that work. I'd like to realize it because it fed into the whole idea of releasing spirit from my work. And the idea of all of these materials that came from nature, that were abstracted from nature, but that served no immediate healing purpose, but some larger healing purpose. And what I did is I sort of recalled the story of the daughter that was especially loving died from polio. There was that whole polio thing where a lot of people became ill. I think even President Roosevelt became crippled from it. And that, so they didn't suffer and argue and fight and blame each other and anything like that. They continued their loving passion for each other. And they enjoyed the sense of the daughter spirit being around them also as part of the love that they had for each other. And but the rabbi in the discussion, it was like, but she had to be released from the furniture which had the love. In other words, which bound her to it was the love that she had experienced with her parents and when they were together. And so what they wanted to have done was to have the daughter released from the furniture. And so some special, I don't know if he was a rabbi, if he was some sort of priest of some kind, of dealing with spirits. And I mean, I know of things like the Dybbuk and like that, but this was very special. And so they performed the ritual, and the furniture, as it was told, the angelic impression of the daughter on the furniture, as they released it more and more with prayer and sacrifice of small objects around it, it got lighter and lighter, and then it disappeared, like she had joined her parents, kind of thing. And it seemed to have relieved a lot of the pressure from the family entirely, like when she then went and joined, her parents, kind of thing. Well, here I was at the art fair, and I said, I'm going to try to serve that piece. And so I went and did some search furniture in secondhand stores of an elderly couple that owned this piece of furniture that was like that furniture, that love seat furniture. And I got lots of little objects. I think they were called, I didn't know exactly what tchotchkes, I think was. And so I went to a lot of the secondhand stores, and I bought a lot of the tchotchkes. And I brought them back to my studio, and I did some research with some of the Kabbalistic prayers and some of the Hebrew prayers. And it's an impossible language. It's an amazing, Hebrew is an amazing language. And I got involved, and I worked on this piece, and in about 2 or 3 months, I had slowly taken the piece apart. And some of my friends who came said, "What have you been doing with that furniture?" The whole, my loft was like all glowing, they said, and stuff like that. And then, so the piece ended up when I originally finished it at the UCLA, was it not the UCLA? That's another interesting kind of story, but. When I finished deconstructing it to release the spirit, a lot of people came to that area because there were a number of artists working at the fair to watch every day the piece sort of being taken apart, and they said that what the result was like the furniture pieces that I had in the show. And so that for me was this sort of confirmed a certain thing about the idea of spirit in things, and how spirit in things, if you're full of love and so on, and you sit somewhere, you just leave a puddle of it, you know.
In the furniture.
Right. And it's like, you know, this was interesting with my mom, because after a while I used to run around looking for puddles of love, you know, and
That's beautiful.
she said, "What kind of artist are you?" So there are all these kind of connections that make clear that there's something else going on, even with the most utilitarian kind of functional things that you hold in your hand, you know, as you turn over the scrambled eggs.
Yeah, the spatula. I think it's true. There's so many things that we, you know, the furniture that we use every day that becomes a reference to the body, the mattresses, the sofas, and that the releasing of the spirit is often, I think, what inspired some people to ask Raphael at the time, you know, take this piece of furniture, it has bad memories for me, release the bad memories and create something, you know, beautiful and profound out of that kind of sense of destruction.
Let me add something to this story, because
Yes.
it's really interesting. I'm working on this piece, and there were a large crowd. A lot of people were curious about that whole story. And so I was working and got an assistant to work with me, and we worked carefully, took it all apart, and slowly I put a projection of a picture of the daughter on it, and that picture became lighter and lighter and lighter also. And in the meantime, what did I do? I played, for some reason, I felt a need to play Pennies from Heaven. You know? And it was Bing Crosby singing Pennies from Heaven. And I felt, you know, somehow there was a relationship of the Pennies from Heaven and the whole situation. What happened was that when I finished the piece, the person that ran the fair said, I want to purchase that piece from you. You have no idea, he said to me, what that piece is about for me. And meanwhile, I always played, you know, Bing Crosby's Pennies from Heaven with the piece. And he said, I want to tell you a story. He said, I live in California along the you know, ocean area, and he used to go up, he had a cabin up in the mountains, and he would go up there with his significant other, and they'd go up there together. And it was snowing, and he took he was driving too fast, took a sharp turn, went off a little cliff about 100 and some feet, plunged down, and he had one of these cars with the metal bar they had across the top, you know? And she woke up, and she broke a finger and a nose and stuff, but he was out, kind of thing. And so she slowly fanned him for, I don't know, half a day. And he came to consciousness, and he looked out, and he said, well, how long have I been here? How did I get here? And she explained the whole thing. And he looked down just outside the car, and there was hundreds of pennies. Hundreds of pennies were there. And, you know, I just did the hum of, you know, Bing Crosby's Pennies from Heaven went through my head. And he felt somehow landing in all those pennies saved their life. Right?
That's a beautiful memory, beautiful. Because you brought up this idea of, you know, this order of things, I'm also interested in the usage of his, you know, Raphael has always been interested in new technology, but in old and humble materials, sort of like at the same time. The scratch laser videos, some digital videos that use moving color. I think it'd be interesting to talk a little bit about this juxtaposition of old technology, new technology, humble materials. If you have thoughts, either of you.
Yeah, the use of technology in the work.
Yeah.
It's really everywhere, no? It's, I mean, I think there's certainly an interest for moving image. I think that's a key point. I would point out to the mid-'80s videos. I mentioned the early films before, but in relation to technology, that's I think one of the most interesting aspects of the work is there. And I've been emphasizing these works a lot in like tours I've been giving, or not just in conversations, with colleagues coming seeing the show, because how they really somehow anticipate or are part of a conversation. I don't know if it's ahead of time or not, that's another question, but around electronic music, for instance. No, this idea of the loop, this idea of the scratch as techniques of editing, of creating, again, a sense of disorientation, a sense of juxtaposed or superimposed temporalities, liminal spaces, subliminal spaces in those images. The works being the video works that Raphael did in the mid-'80s using a joystick to manipulate a laser disc, right? If I'm describing it correctly. So that I think it's a very relevant and very innovative way of thinking of image and found image, especially. That I can really think of so many connections, with video artists that would, emerge later, reflecting upon, similar issues and interests.
Yeah, the connection with electronic music, for sure. As we were coming in to sit, the soundtrack that was playing, we recognized it as the soundtrack from some of the videos where you hear a repeated millisecond of the film that's repeated over and over again. It becomes like a genre on its own.
Yes.
The sounds.
Yes. And the materiality of them, those works, they do have like a strong physical phenomenon on them.
Yeah, and what you were saying, the Julieta was talking about the films as like the destruction of the narrative. When you go and watch the laser videos, some of them are hard to watch for very long. They're disturbing.
Yes.
And when they go on for 7 or 8 minutes, it's visceral. It's like you feel it really in your body as you're watching these.
It's completely.
It becomes almost like a deprivation experiment, which I did a lot of research on, and where you sort of leave your body, but in the process you somehow feel you left a part of you behind. And you sort of watch the images overlapping and like septs, like hearing other languages and so on.
Yeah.
It takes you like into another life space, which was interesting because I was doing a lot of research on reincarnation and that kind of thing in terms of spirit and objects and so on. Which there's a lot of that research which I don't discuss that openly because I don't want people sort of walking down the street and going, oh, there's Raphael coming.
Manipulating the eyeballs. I think, we have, according to my time here, 1 minute and 11 seconds left, so I think it might be a good time to see if there's questions from the audience, unless there's a burning issue that either of you want to.
No, I think it would be lovely to hear from the audience, but
Yes.
I have a question for you just before.
Yeah.
I'd like to play audience for a second here. About the memorial, no? That's such a wonderful piece that we didn't have the chance to discuss much during the last few minutes. And that it was a very, I would just like to share that anecdote with the audience. Also, the fact that you approached us to donate that work to El Museo, and your retrospective was in preparation already. We were working on it, but you, I think very movingly so, asked us to show it before, and there was a reason for that. And so we did like a small, like a short, short duration exhibition to show it. yeah, that's such an important work, no? That's been then, shown in the retrospective, and it's been like widely discussed and reproduced. And there's this work that I think it's really like a monumental work of your later work, of your later practice, that, talks about your ongoing interest in colonialism as like a longue durée. No, I think that's an expression coined by French historian Fernand Braudel, that I think John uses in his essay to discuss your engagement with the theme of colonialism, the long durée, the long duration of colonialism, appearing in different moments throughout your language and your interests and your works. But I wanted to ask about the genesis of that work that so openly and overtly addresses colonialism.
Well, I've been studying in Las Casas and all of those works for many years. Prior to founding the Museo, I was very much involved in all of that history. And I used to periodically dream of myself in the midst of some kind of battle like that, where I'd be laying amongst all of the people dying and, all of these weapons and stuff. And years passed, and periodically that dream would come up again. And then I decided that it was calling me, to reconcile it. And I feel that way about a lot of my work, that if I pass a couch that calls me that there's something that has to be reconciled, even if it's just to launder it. I was always responding to situations like that, and that was one of the situations where I said I need to finally reconcile what needed to be. It reminded me of that movie later on where the psychologist didn't know he was dead, and this child was leading him around to unfinished business. Well, it was like, oh, that might have been alongside the other dreaming I was doing. Was that kind of situation. But again, I have a family that just believes in ghosts. What can I say?
It's part of your environment, your life.
Yes.
Yeah, but the fact that you wanted it to be shown in 2020 was because
Well, yes,
of the
it had to be. It had to be. That was part of the reconciling.
Yes. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear from the audience if there are questions, and I think there's folks with microphones circulating.
Some people say it's not relevant anymore, you can't shock people. And when you were doing a lot of your earlier work, I'm sure a lot of people were shocked. It was different, and it was shocking to a lot of people, but do you think that term is still relevant these days, the avant-garde?
Some of what you said got muffled for me a little. Could you?
I was just wondering if you considered the term avant-garde still relevant.
Oh, avant-garde.
Pardon me?
Did you say avant-garde?
Avant-garde, yes.
Relevant. I think ideas have a way of creating a bridge with that part of our whole bio-brain system architecture, which precedes it, and so that those ideas can put a foot on the door between what mind matter thing, where mind is this. It's a history of impulses. which then a narrative forms around these impulses. And my feeling is that that cells have consciousness, and that and that we also, like the furniture, we pick up things. You know, the idea of a virus and picking up a virus, and there are more complex things than the virus, but the virus is a part of, which can lead us to a life. And it's within that framework. For instance, my sister would call it a walk-in. You know, she would say that there are certain times, for instance, when you get injured, like a concussion, or you hurt yourself so badly you're lost in the pain of the hurt, that you leave yourself open for that kind of connection, like the puddle. And so you then make this link, and you then want to know it more. You want to know it better. And sometimes you find yourself with people who have a lot of those qualities of that puddle. You know, and that's a way of reconciling. Another way is language and ideas and so on that lead you into. They're like breadcrumbs. You know, they carry you along, these ideas, and then suddenly something materializes from it, certain kind of alchemy, you know, or Kabbalah stuff. That's, I don't know if that helps, but.
No problem. There's another question.
Hello.
Hi.
Before I ask my question, I just want to say I'm so grateful for the body of your work, because I'm from the Bronx and I'm a New Yorican, and so like it means a lot to me. My question is, I read a really good essay from Lorraine O'Grady, and I think it's Olympia's Maid. She talks about her as a performance artist. She felt uncomfortable after a certain point as she aged, because she felt like the audience started being prejudiced because her body was aging. They applied a lot of decay to her work. I wonder how you look at performance now as you're getting older.
Performance in what? Is there a larger context that you're associating?
I think, is this still okay?
Yeah.
I think more towards yourself now. Do you reflect on like maybe if it's something that you want to continue to be doing, or do you worry about how audiences interpret, what you're doing now that your body is changing?
No.
Okay, cool. Good.
Can I just add to that?
Say something. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Lorraine's performance work is quite different from his, though. Lorraine O'Grady's performance work is often about the body. It's deals with Black female subjectivity, but it's not necessarily having to do with interactivity or healing. I would not necessarily say that Lorraine's work is similar to Raphael's, because we make the work together in Raphael's pieces.
I think maybe what the reference was to, like how people are seeing Lorraine's aging body and responding to it in a performance.
Right.
But the thing is, like, to break a piano is, it's a,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But look at the great way that he's done this piece. I mean, I was concerned, right? I was like, oh, Ralph's gonna do a piece, but he freaking made it happen, right? He found other people to do the work. I honestly believe that if you're an artist, and there's numerous artists who are still working today in their 90s. You're a really great artist. You find ways around to still make it work, and that's what makes him so important. You know, like there's no disability, right? There's no disability. There's just opportunity with Ralph in some ways. And that's what he's shown me in this piece. There's always opportunity if you twist it the right way. Think beyond the boundaries.
Yeah. And the change in scale from the grand piano to the toy piano, which this isn't the first time, right? A performance from Arte No Es Vida, was it?
Yeah.
Included baby toy pianos, right?
My sister never forgave me.
For destroying the family piano, the baby piano, the toy piano.
Yes.
I think there was a question over there.
Oh, there's another question? Oh, great.
Who has the mic?
Hi, hello.
sis.
I just wanted to ask you like an universal question because I'm from Argentina, I'm not from New York, I'm not from Puerto Rico, but your work really touched me. But since we're sitting here in this space and you had this vision of this space, which is really amazing to be, sitting here and you thought of it, you made it happen. My question is that, when you dream of your work, is that dream always the same dream, the same vision, or that vision evolves with time?
Well, what happens is that I always dream of people somehow that are interested in my work. What I mean to say is, are a part of it, some metaphysical way are a part of it. And in the dream, this person appears. And sometimes there's conversation, and sometimes there's just a hello, Ralph. And so I say, hello.
I'd freak out.
Right.
And then I wake up and I say, I wonder what connection that person has with me in relation to this object that I was working on, this piece of furniture or piano, or what is the connection? It's sort of like when I was in college, I had this professor who was always chasing me around like, you did this wrong, Raphael, and you did that wrong, Raphael, and you did that wrong, Raphael. And so my sister, of course, who's an astrologer, had some psychic friends. The term psychic is kind of interesting in itself. And so she said, we have to visit this psychic. We have to find out what's the relationship between you two. And well, she took me to him, and he went into, I guess you call it a trance. And he came back after about 15 minutes, and he told me things like I was part of the first wave of the Atlanteans and stuff like that, which a lot of people say, aha, see, there's a clue that somebody's making something up. And so he said to me, well, this professor and you were in one of these wars during the Babylonian Sumerian period, and that you were on opposite sides, and you were always, you were related, you were like cousins, and you would never forgave each other, and every time you would meet in a piece of the desert, there'd be a battle. And so it had never resolved itself. And so he said, he gave me an idea of how to resolve it. And so, I mean, it was simple. He had me connect up with the family through cousins, and then back to my family, and open discussion about those wars and a lot of the memories of them. And slowly he stopped, chasing me like to get me caught somehow and for being, bad, or he always say, well, the spelling here is really peculiar. Why do you use it? And things like that. And I would say, I just thought that made sense to spell stop, S-T-O-P. And so I would say that there are realms within which we are aliens in when we try to visit, and times when we're not. And I've always enjoyed the times when I've not felt like an alien, when someone appears standing in front of me who just says to me, "Hi, Ralph." It just seemed to me to say, "Hi."
Thank you for that. I think we have time for one more question.
I just want to say that
Patrick.
I'm really, really enjoying right now the idea that 52 years ago you founded el Museo del Barrio. You kind of changed the art world in New York by introducing a Latino institution. And 52 years after, you're here now. Your retrospective is in the Museo del Barrio galleries. We just experienced something incredible. You're revitalizing the energy by doing this work, these performances. So I just want to thank you. Thank you in the name of the community. Thank you in the name of the Museo del Barrio. 52 years of love history. Thank you, Raphael.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. I just want to tell you that the galleries are still open, so if you haven't had a chance to see the show, really run and see it because it is fantastic. Please enjoy, and thank you for coming.
Is today the last day?
Tomorrow is the last day, so since you're here.